First off, rotations in the coordinate plane. Let's do a little review here. There's a positive direction and a negative direction. In math, positive direction is counterclockwise, because if I think back to my coordinate plane, this is quadrant 1, here's 2, 2, 3, and 4. So when we go counterclockwise, that's positive. When you go clockwise, that's negative. And the reason it's like this is math was invented before clocks. René Descartes was the mathematician that published this or made it explain what was going on. So when he did this, he chose positive direction, and there's a lot of other explanations. So in other words, you could have two answers for the same rotation. If I turn something 90 degrees positive, that's the same thing as negative 270 degrees negative, because negative 270 degrees, you end up at the same point. When you do a rotation in the coordinate plane, when I turn it, notice my x becomes my y becomes my x. When I do a 90-degree rotation, notice if I'm in the first quadrant, I'm going to end up in the second quadrant. So in the second quadrant, x is negative. So we're going to say, oh, that's the opposite of y and x. If you do another rotation, you end up with the opposite of x and the opposite of y. You do another 90 degree, you end up with y and the opposite of x. Now notice, 270 degree rotation, I could also write that as negative 90. Because if I take 360 minus 270, or 270 minus 360, I get negative 90. Notice 180 degree rotation is going to be exactly the same, positive or negative. So that one doesn't matter if you say clockwise or counterclockwise. And then a 90 degree rotation would be negative 270 degrees if we did it clockwise. So there's more than one way of displaying these. Now let's take a look at example 7 here. I want to find the coordinates of Q, R, and S after rotation of 270 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. I'm going to graph the preimage and the image. So let's start by graphing our preimage. So I'm going to graph the point negative 3, 0. I'm going to graph the point negative 2, 2. And then I'm going to graph the point negative 1, 0. So here's my triangle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 270 degree rotation, which means I'm going to take each y value, I'm going to write that as my x. I'm going to take each x value and write that as the opposite of x, and that's my new y value. So let's take a look what happens here. Q primed is going to be at y, which is 0, and then I'll do the opposite of x, which is 3. So Q primed is at 0, 3. R primed is going to be at 2 and the opposite of negative 2, which is 2. So R primed is going to be at 2 and 2. And then finally, S primed is going to be at 0 and 1. So I should, before I forget, I should go back and label this. So here's Q, here's R, and here's S. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to change colors here so you can see the difference. Q primed is at 0 and 3. R primed is at 2 and 2. And S primed is at 0 and 1. And there we have it. Do you see the rotation going on here? Return that 270 degrees counterclockwise or 90 degrees clockwise.